stop here. This is the place.
One of the things that I love is that two films idea of your life. And there's two stories you can tell. One that is safe and full of regret, and one that is risky and full of pride and joy. This place seems to be a stepping stone across that bridge that is so scary to walk across.
I really believe that people can tackle far more than they think they can. My name is Veronika Scott. I'm 24 years old, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Empowerment Plan here in Detroit. I think women have a really difficult time understanding how valuable they are. The idea of self-worth is very important to me because I grew up a kid of addicts, and we were kind of set up for failure. We were set up in a hole that we had to climb our way out of. I ended up getting a great scholarship to go to college, and a class ended up changing my entire life. The class assignment was designed something to fill actual needs. I did my research at homeless shelters. So the first product I created was the coat. The coat looks like a regular jacket during the day, but when you open it up, you can actually slide your feet in all the way up to your knees and Velcro it closed again to make a sleeping bag. I was talking to the homeless population in that area and getting feedback and making prototype after prototype. When I was on like prototype number 7, a woman came out of the shelter that I was in and she was yelling at me. She was full on screaming. And she said, "We don't need coats. Coats are pointless, we need jobs." And really, she was completely right. Because a coat is just a Band-Aid for a systemic issue. And what really would have the impact is hiring the population that would need them in the first place. We hire only individuals from homeless shelters, and then we train them in everything from sewing and manufacturing to employment, as well as tech and whatever they need to become more independent and to be proud of their accomplishments and be proud of themselves.
I'm happy to be working for a cause. It's no greater joy than me coming to work knowing that I can make this coat and help somebody that was in my position. So I take great pride in what I do. I really do.
You know, actually, I sat at my dinner table with my son last night and I cried because I was like, you know, last year we were just in a shelter and now this year we're in a home.
I was the only person that could create this opportunity for myself. And that's all we're trying to do, is give them the power to take control of the life that they want to lead. No matter what you've gone through, you still can do a lot with what you have. Really nervous as well. It's a good group of people, and it's been really, just like the past day has been insane. And Duke really didn't have to sell it that hard. 5 minutes in, he was like, "So it's on a vineyard and you're going to be hanging out with people." I'm like, "All right, done." I get sent to all the cold climates. I never get called to go to California. Everyone's like, "Do you want to go to Alberta in January?" I'm like, "Sure." So when you design jackets, you tend to get stuck in some very cold places. So I was immediately hooked. And for me, I'm looking at this as an opportunity to just kind of plug back into my creativity and get inspired by a lot of people here. And I just so happen to be talking about what I do at the same time, which is awesome. But like the video said, this is all something that started off as a class project for me when I was going to college. And I was going to art and design school. I wasn't even studying fashion. I was studying product design, which is, to sum it up, the art of making everyday objects look like fast and sexy. We had a whole 6-week course on sexy toasters. And I'm not even joking, that was a teacher that talked about designing a sexy toaster. And I've talked about this before, especially to like younger kids. They're like, "So what does a sexy toaster look like?" And I'll get up and draw. I drew like a toaster with a bra on it or something for them to understand. But it does sound really silly, but that was some of the work that we were doing. We were designing things that were trendy and that would go out of style and then be obsolete within like 6 months. And it was also really hard to go through college and everything I had worked on for years and years was all on the computer. And that if my computer died, and after spending all of these sleepless nights and doing all these all-nighters, all the work that I had done would be gone. And I would have nothing to show for it. And for me, I love talking and engaging with other people. So we had this studio that said, "Look, we love that you design beautiful stuff, but you're a bunch of designers in Detroit, And we'd like you to actually design to fill a real need out in the community. And there are lots. And I'm sure, by show of hands, how many of you guys have been to Detroit? Like a good chunk. Awesome. All right. Just raise your hand if it was just the airport. There's like 3 people that are like, yes. Raise your hand if you just watched 8 Mile and felt like a deep personal connection to Eminem. Okay, good. Like spiritual connection to Detroit. There's a lot of people that have some really interesting ideas of what Detroit is in their mind. Some people, it's this amazing, beautiful blank canvas, and you can come in and create whatever you want, and it's this wild west of creativity. And then others think it's this post-apocalyptic wasteland that you'll walk into and die. And that's it. Those are the 2 perspectives. And most stories are one or the other. And it's not that. Detroit has a huge, deep, rich history and people that have been there for centuries and families that have been a part of that community. And to pretend that they don't exist and pretend that it's a blank canvas is not the way. So we're somewhere in the middle. It's not post-apocalyptic wasteland, but at the same time, it's not this kind of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed way of looking at it. And my entire family is from Detroit. I was raised there for generations. My family's from that city. So for me, it's something really deeply personal. And when Googling needs in Detroit, because that's how students do research, it's like, okay, needs in Detroit. You come up with a lot of things right away. So you come up with public education, public transportation, all this stuff you cannot tackle in a 3-month class. So there's no way that you're going to restructure public education within the city in 3 months. So as a group, we kind of went down this list. And in Detroit, there are 20,000 people that are homeless. That's counted. The estimate is about 40,000. But in reality, there's also 70,000 abandoned buildings. So I'm not just talking about like a house or just, a small structure. This could be a multi-level building. And so a lot of people just disappear into the landscape. You can't see them. It's not in your face. And a lot of people forget that it's there. I get complaints from other cities that email me saying, there's so many homeless people. Can you come here and do something about it? Because they're in our face every day and we just don't know what to do. And they ruin the aesthetic of the city. And for Detroit, there's so much space and so much land that you can't see it. It's not as prevalent. And none of us really knew that. We saw the number. So we decided, okay, we're going to look at some shelters. We're going to talk to some people. And at least this way we can actually talk to other human beings and start there. And we picked the first shelter that popped up in Google because we're really, really good at research. And the first place that showed up, and this is what I learned, all these shelters and all these soup kitchens, everyone has a street name. Every place has a nickname. It's coded on the street. So if you know that one place, Mana Meals, is named Mega Meals because they have the best food. While this place that I found, its nickname was just Hell, period. It was the last stop for most people. Between being on the streets and being in a shelter, this is just a warming center. Probably half the size of this room with about 50 to 100 chairs in there and a television. That is it. And all you can do is sit for 8 hours before you're rotated out for another group. Everything you own must fit on your lap or underneath your chair, otherwise it is thrown out. You don't have to be sober, you don't have to be clean, you just need to come in, which this building is not the friendliest building. It is a 1-story windowless building, painted gray and surrounded by barbed wire. One entrance, and that's it. So once you go through the first gate of barbed wire, and then you go get buzzed into the second door, then you have to go through 2 metal detectors and a pat-down before you're let into the building. And then once you're through all of that, you're told to write your name down if you have it, the date, and what is given in the system is your homeless identification number. So how they track people within the system of if you're using the soup kitchen, how do they track people, how they're using the shelter, how do you keep track of everybody? And instead of referring to people by their names, they just give everybody a number. So you're no longer treated as a human at all. Most of the time you're treated as if you've done something horribly wrong, as if you're like a prisoner. So once you give that number, you're told to sit. And you get to sit for 8 hours. And that's it. You don't have any beds, you must sleep in the chair, and then there's hundreds of other people waiting for your slot. because they only have 100 chairs in that room. There are 20,000 people that are homeless and only 3 shelters. And they can only house about 1,500 people on a given night. So there's thousands of people waiting outside of this building up against the barbed wire, waiting for the shift to rotate. And so this is the place I picked randomly on Google. It is in one of the worst parts of the city. The highest murder rate is that block in the entire city. And none of that shows up when you do Google searching. And certainly the street name does not. And I go there with a group of friends and classmates, and we bring all of our design research crap with us, which is a bag full of sticky notes and Sharpies and disposable cameras and a really horribly written questionnaire that was like, talk to us about your day. How could a product improve your day? What type of product would that be? Very, very targeted, horribly written questions. And I show up with this group. We get to talk to a manager. His name was Sprat, and he had his arm in a fight from breaking up a fight the day before. And we talked to him, and he's like, oh yeah, you want to come back? Be my guest. You want to talk to people? This should be fun. And he's like, I've seen a lot of people like you. And I'm like, oh, thanks for the very warm welcome. And it's true, he had seen a lot of interesting things at that point. And he totally expected us never to show up again. Because you go through that building, most people don't. And so he's like, all right, come at 8 p.m. That's when the shift changes over. You can show up then. It's like, okay, awesome. I come out, I'm really excited. I get all my disposable cameras ready to go. And the next day, when we're all supposed to be there on a Wednesday at 8 p.m., I come there and no one else is there. None of my fellow classmates, none of my friends. They were all terrified and no one showed up. And so I'm standing there with my bag of crap, and I have to go through the 2 metal detectors, the pat-down and everything, and Mr. Spratt is there, ready to greet me and is very surprised that I'm even there. And he pushes me out in front of the crowd of about 50 people watching television. And he clicks off the television and goes, good luck, you're going to need it. And that's it. And everybody just stands up and starts swearing. And it takes him 10 minutes to calm the crowd down. And I'm up there with my bag up here, as if it's going to protect me from bodily harm at this point. And it takes 10 minutes. And all I could verbally vomit out after that was, after everyone calmed down, was, I'm broke, I live with my grandparents, and I need your help passing a class, which is really inspiring. And because I'm up there just holding this, and I just really want to talk to you. And I just need your help. And the general response was, one woman came up to me and said this to my face, if you want to help us turn our fucking television back on. I was like, got it. I'm going to just stand over here for a little while. And that was the response. I got 10 people to talk to me, gave all 10 disposable cameras away. I think I got 3 back 6 months later. But that was the initial start. And I was like, all right, I'm going to be back again. I just want to talk. Like I said, I'm not doing anything. I just want to be here to talk to people. And I showed up every week, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, at 8 p.m. for 5 months. Same time, same place, would show up, bring my stuff with me, and most of the time just kind of talk to people. I had no idea what I was doing or what I was trying to get out of it. And 2 things really inspired this, this organization, this coat, everything. 2 things happened. One, there was a playground across the street, literally 20 feet away from this shelter, and it was covered in tarps and clothes, and 2 people were living inside of it. And so I take a picture on my phone as we're walking around one day, and I come back the next week, and it is burned to the ground in a turf war, completely ripped up, melted, destroyed. And so the 2 people living in there ended up surviving that, only to pass away about 1.5 years later, just due to living on the streets for so long. They had been chronically homeless for about 15 years, not a single night off. And so that was their home. And for me, it was the most shocking thing in the world. Was, why would you build yourself something that someone is literally trying to give you for free across the street? It's not as if you can't get there. It's not as if you don't know it's there. It's not as if you don't have access. They're trying to give you something for free, and you're not taking it and you're building it yourself. And what I realized, and this took a long time, was that it's not about actual physical warmth or any of the physical needs. It's more about the emotional need. It's more about pride. And it's more about independence. And when we talk about charity, pride is usually taken out of it. We don't usually talk about someone's pride or dignity. And the best example I can give of that is watching a sandwich drive-by take place. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this process, but it happens a lot, especially in that area. In that shelter, everybody was so terrified of that location. It had such a bad rap that even the places that were sent to give out food were scared. So instead, they would load up a van, they would all get in a white van, roll down the windows, and drive by going like 15, 20 miles an hour slowly in front of the shelter and toss sandwiches out the window at people. It's the sandwich drive-by is the only way I can describe it. And I'm like, how the hell would you feel if you got hit in the face with a sandwich? And people are so afraid of you for no reason other than that you exist, that they are throwing food at you like you're an animal, like you're in a zoo. And I always wondered, at the end of your drive, did you just like sit there and pat yourself on the back like, good job? People were hungry and we fed them. And that's how we tend to look at charity a lot of the time. It's like we took care of a need. Who cares if we destroyed everything else and made this person feel like they're like a wild, ferocious, feral animal. And from that, it was really difficult to try to like, okay, now how do I make this into a class project that I can actually get a grade for and pass? And so for me, the initial step was, okay, you've got thousands of people waiting outside. You've got people creating structures out of nothing so that they can survive. Let's just make a jacket. Let's make that simple. And then let's make something that doesn't look like somebody else's trash, that isn't somebody else's hand-me-down, that isn't worn by 50 people before this person got it. And when you're walking down the street, especially with our jacket, we change the design so often and the colors so that you can't tell that this person that you're walking by is homeless. When I spent so much time out there, you could see people holding coats together with bungee cords because they were rotting off of them. We don't want somebody to be able to look at another human being and immediately say, that person's homeless, just by what they're wearing. So the coat was meant to offer that a little bit of pride of this not being somebody else's trash, something new made for them, but at the same time, allow them to move around and be able to, you know, if they can't get into a shelter, where else are they going? And so that's how it started. And I ended up with a street name because I spent so much time designing this coat. And like, first coat took 80 hours to make. I had to learn how to sew from my mother, which was single-handedly the worst experience of my life, and hers. And hers for sure. It took 80 hours to make one. And it had like broken needles in it. I learned how to sew with recycled trash bags, orange construction fencing, and old wool coats. It was trying to be a coat tent. The tent part never panned out. So it became a coat sleeping bag pretty immediately. And we built this. We brought it back to the shelter. I showed everybody. And in trying it on and bringing it back, I was like one of those kids, as many parents in this room know, you get the artwork that's like the macaroni painting that is absolutely hideous, but your kid is really proud of it, and they show it to you like it's the greatest thing they've ever done, and you just have to smile and be like, good job. That is exactly how everybody treated me with my first prototype. It was hideous. It weighed 23 pounds. Coats do not weigh 23 pounds. I brought it back, like so proud of myself. Literally parts of my body, blood and things were in there. And the first person that tried it on actually couldn't stand up inside of it. This poor little woman, and it was very big and heavy. And then when you laid it out on the ground as a sleeping bag, as a tent, the tent part immediately collapsed. And I was like, it's a sleeping bag. It never wanted to be a tent. Because of the black trash bag that I used in this thing, because I was trying to recycle and I didn't understand that meaning yet, when you laid it out that way, the first response is, there's no way I'm sleeping in that. It looks like a fucking body bag. I'm like, got it. Never doing that again. Nixing black trash bags from now on. And so when you laid it out like that, it's like, all right, back to the drawing board, make another prototype. We made like 5 prototypes. Each one took between 62 hours to 85 per prototype. And I did so many of these that I ended up with a street name in that area that I still have to this day that I'm very proud of. I am known as the Crazy Coat Girl, or the Coat Lady for short. And people would be coming up to me. And at this point, I also had a spokesperson. His name was Pee-wee. He was 5'2". He had been on the streets about 16 years consecutively, 20 years, because he had a 1-month stay in a hotel. And he had the deepest, raspiest voice. And everybody was terrified of him, and I had no idea why. But he really liked the product, and he was like the pitch person. So we'd walk around this area of Detroit, be like, this is the Coat Lady. We want you to try on the coat, sign up here. And he would have a sheet and a clipboard, and we're like, you can try it on, you can check it out. He's like, I get the first one. His name was literally number 1, and everybody else get in line behind me. And strangers that had been on the streets for decades were coming up to me and saying, so, heard you're the Coat Lady. So when are we going to get coats? I'm like, this is never. Like, this is a class project. It takes me 2 weeks to make one. And there's no way this is ever going to exist ever. And so many people did that. I was like, well, I guess there's a demand for it and people are excited. I guess we should start making them. And like I said, one of the first women that actually had tried on the coat was the woman that was yelling at me that day, that I brought back a prototype, and she's like, look, what you're doing is absolute crap. It's like completely pointless. She's like, I need a job. I don't need one of your jackets. And I was like, that's completely valid. That makes sense. So for me, as a student, I was like, all right, I'll just start hiring people. How do you hire people? What do you have to do in order to hire people? I had no clue what that was like. I went to art school, and they did not have a business planning course in art school. And so I talked to a few people, and I was like, all right, so if people want it, and there's people that want to make it, all I need now is a business plan. I've heard that's what you do to get money. And I know that I need money in order to do this. And I don't know anything about business planning. I've never done that. So my first business plan was very pretty. It was the world's prettiest, most well-designed business plan. It was 15 pages of pictures and had one very, I cannot emphasize how small the spreadsheet was in the back, because I had to drink like a whole bottle of wine to be comfortable in Excel that first time. And it said we needed $1,600, $1,600 to operate for a year. I showed that business plan to so many people. No one laughed. No one even said, you're kind of underestimating costs. No one said anything. It said the only line item was sewing machines. No thread, no needles, no fabric, no nothing. Magical elves were the employees. That was it. That was the entire business plan. And I was like, all right, now I'm going to go get the $1,600 and we'll start. I have no idea what that means, but now I need $1,600. And I didn't know anybody with money. None of my family members had ever started a business. No one in my family had $1,600 to give to something like this. So I basically was like, all right, I'm going to this fancy private arts college. They have money. I give them money every year, so they should give me money to start my business. That's not how it works. And so I was like, I'm going to set up and get a meeting with the dean, and they'll give me money. They'll totally give it to me. I get a meeting, and the guy that was the dean was a short, crass Australian gentleman who had been the design director for Patagonia for 20 years. I had no idea. And when I sit down and I go through the business plan with him, which goes very quickly, because I think there was 5 sentences total in the entire document, all pictures. And we go through it, and he's like, you obviously thought this through. It was very well thought out. He's like, but there's no way that we're going to give you any money. I was like, oh, okay. Well, that changes things. He's like, but I may know somebody that can. He's like, I'll put in a call. We'll see if he responds. And I get a call the next day from the CEO of Carhartt. How many of you guys are familiar with Carhartt? Like, good. Okay, awesome. I love that. So I didn't know who they were. And so when the CEO called me, he's like, I heard you got this business plan that's pretty good. You got your stuff together. I don't know what he told him, but it certainly wasn't the truth. So he's like, I heard you got your stuff together. Come to my office in 2 hours, wear what you're wearing, and bring everything you have. So Carhartt's based in Detroit. And I was like, sure, this is great. Show up in like a mixture of clothes, like whatever I was wearing at the time. And what looks like a giant trash bag at that point, which it was the coat, which was really beautiful. And then my very fancy booklet. And I go and meet with him. And everybody's in suits. There's a fountain in the entryway. And I'm there looking like I'm taking out people's recycling. And I get to meet with him for an hour. We go through the whole thing. And he looks at that Excel sheet and goes, so what does $1,600 actually get you? I'm like, sewing machines, as you can see on my line item, my one line item. And he goes, okay, well, what kind of sewing machine? And since this was all very new to me, and I had no sewing experience minus the home sewing machine in my grandparents' house, there were only two types of sewing machines in my mind. The home one, and then the non-home sewing machine, which I heard were called industrial sewing machines. And that's what everything else in the world was made on. And I was like, the industrial kind. And he sits there, and I didn't realize how patient he was being, because they've been around for 125 years in apparel, and I'm saying the industrial kind of sewing machine. And he goes, okay, there's more than one type of industrial sewing machine. This was news. And I was there like deer in headlights, like, okay. And he starts listing them off. He's like, there are single needle, there are double needle, there are triple needle, there are sergers. And once I couldn't count the needles, I kind of just blacked out. So I was like, all right, my very first business decision was 3 needles sounds like overkill, but 2 needles are bound to be better and faster than 1. That was it. I was like, we need double needle sewing machines, of course. And he's like, how many do you want? I'm like, 2. He's like, we'll make it 3, just in case. I'm like, okay. And he's like, do you want them to have a walking foot? What kind? I'm like, yes, have the feet walk. Like, just yes to all of it. Whatever you want. And I got the most tricked out, like pimped out sewing machines. The most absurd bells and whistles on it that I ended up having to strip off years later. I was like, yes, all of it. We'll take everything. And the next day, I get a call from the vice president saying, we have, not only do we have all of these sewing machines here for you, which each weigh 550 pounds apiece, we have all this fabric that we had gone through the Carhartt store and picked out, and needles, threads, bobbins, oil. I didn't understand oil and how that was used in the process. And he's like, we have all of this. And it weighs about 2.5 tons. We have 2 freight trucks coming your way from Mexico and Kentucky. Where do you want them to go? And I hadn't thought that far ahead in my business plan yet. And I didn't include rent or anything like space to actually exist in. And so for the first 2 weeks, they were being routed to my grandparents' house. And he was like, do you need a lift gate? Do you have like a loading dock? I'm like, does a garage work for all of those things? Because I don't have anything else. And so my next item on the to-do list is like, find a space. And so that, plus the $1,600 that he wrote the check to me that day, the CEO wrote the check from his personal bank account and was like, also just in case. And I'm like, and I walk out of there like I had won the lottery. I'm calling people, freaking out. My friends, I'm like, oh my God, this is it. We're done. We can start. I didn't know what start meant, but it was just going to happen. And obviously, we kind of blew through the $1,600 pretty quickly, and I got an old utility closet in a shelter that was less than 800 square feet. And we got set up. There was no windows, no HVAC. And we're like, all right, now we got the space, we got the stuff, we can go. And so the first 3 people I hired were from the shelter that I was in at the time. Annis was the first person, and then Alicia, and then Demetria. So Annis had been, I think she was like 58, was one of the oldest people in the group, but she totally did not expect to get the job. That was my first time on the other side of the interview table. So it was like they all showed up early. I'm like, you're nice and you're early. Awesome. Hired. Done. And they had all filled out the form, and they had all checked off the box saying that they had been convicted of felony crimes. I was like, everybody has that. Doesn't matter. It's fine. Like, who cares? And so those were the first 3 people. And it was amazing to see within the first 6 months, each one of them had moved out of the shelter completely. That wasn't the plan. That wasn't what I had set out to do. And they had done it completely on their own. And, to this point now, fast forward 4 years, been around for 4 years, we've hired over 50 people. We've made over 15,000 units and distributed them across 40 U.S. states, 6 Canadian provinces, New Zealand, Australia, Switzerland, Sweden, Malaysia, South Africa, France, and the U.K. And thank you. Thanks. And I think the thing that we're most proud of is with those 50 people that we hire, we focus on hiring parents. So we want this kind of generational change. And so for those 50 people we've employed, each one of them has on average about 3 kids. And so also those 50 individuals have all come through our program, and within 4 to 6 weeks now, which is our time, we can help somebody move out of the shelter permanently with no recidivism back. So even if they don't work out with us, even if we have to let them go or they move on to another job, they're still 6 months, a year later, maintaining that job. And they're not falling back into the shelter where we hired them. And right now, shelters exist as this kind of revolving door. You see the same people over and over and over again. And then you see families. You see the same. Some shelter will see the parents. They'll see the kids. They'll see the grandkids. Because that's what you're raised into. That's what you know. And that's what you're comfortable with. And so they'll see generations of this whole family stuck in this cycle. And for us, it's really exciting. That's what we love doing, is being part of this stepping stone out. And we get to break that cycle, which is awesome. So how are those kids going to be raised no longer in the shelter, no longer getting sent into foster care, no longer having to be raised by 6 or 7 different people and bouncing around for years? And that's the impact that we've been really proud of. But a weird thing that we never predicted would happen is that we get tours all the time, which is weird because we don't make food. We don't give samples out. Like, you don't get to snack. This is not Hershey's. Like, it's really amazing how many people want to come and visit Empowerment Plan. And every time they do, there is at least one person that does this. They'll walk up to somebody and be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you were homeless," and like grab their shoulder. I can't believe you were homeless. And we're just like, what? One, what did you expect to see when you got here? 2, do you not recognize how insulting you're being by the amount of shock that you have? Like, I can't believe it. And frankly, for us, it's amazing that people come in with this preconceived notion of what homelessness looks like. I could tell you all to close your eyes right now and think of a homeless person, and I bet you if we drew them all up, they would look almost identical. It's this person on the street corner that's begging. It's usually a guy. It's usually an older man sitting there asking for money. That's what you'd have in your head. But homelessness can mean anything. Homelessness is not a defining characteristic. It shouldn't tell you anything about somebody. It is just like a temporary state of being. You don't have a place to go. That's it. And I think that's been the most amazing thing that we've seen change by people coming and visiting our space, is that you've got these amazing, intelligent people that, how dare you look at them with pity and feel bad for them and sit there and be like, "Oh, that's so tough." Because frankly, they've gone through hell. They've gone through some of the hardest things that you can ever imagine and have come out the other side and are still standing. They do not deserve pity. They deserve to be admired. Frankly, they're badass. They do not get to be looked down upon for going through that. It should not follow them through life. And that's what I've seen with the team that we have. But also just personally, like both of my parents are still unemployed to this day. They've been unemployed for 20 years. They struggle with addiction. We've bounced around to many different places. And if it wasn't for a couple of family members, we would have been in the exact same situation as most of the people we employ. I can tell you about how many times we moved, how many couches we had to sleep on, that fear, that constant terror of not knowing what's going to happen next when you get evicted again, that constant fear, like when your parents may or may not have to steal food out of a grocery store because they cannot afford to buy it, that fear and that anger and that anxiety and that all of it is so intense because every argument is about money. Every conversation is about money and the lack of it and what do you do. And then none of it's focused on kids and education, how they're doing in school, because you're so worried about just surviving. And I can tell you how many people, including my own family, that looked at my siblings and I as just kind of like worthless extensions of our parents. You can see this every time you see some family of, you can tell that somebody's using drugs or they're unemployed. Most of the time, people just assume the kids are going to end up exactly like them. Most of my family didn't even bother learning our names. They figured at this point, they're pretty much doomed to repeat the same crap. And they were done with it. They were so fed up with it. And so even teachers, we were the ones that were always late, that couldn't get to school. We're the ones that showed up in dirty clothes, that were really shy, that couldn't talk to other people, that struggled with all these things, would show up with bruises. And nobody would look or pay attention. And so people just assume by default that we were worthless. And that's something that you get as soon as you label somebody as like in poverty or that they're homeless, is that you immediately get this also assumption of that they have no value and that they're going to contribute nothing. And if it wasn't for my grandfather, my grandparents, I nearly failed out of middle school completely, flunked out, and he sat me down and he's like, look, you are on the fast track to becoming exactly like your parents. Good job. He's like, this is it. You only have one way out. You don't have a college fund. You don't have people that can pay or afford any of this. This is it. You have to do it yourself, otherwise you're stuck. And I remember hating him for it at the time. We did homework for weeks to try to come up to get out of that. But if it wasn't for him, I would be there. If I didn't have that exposure to what life could be like. Here are people that have vacations, and they have a house, and they're able to afford all these different types of food, and like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I think that's my personal tie into the reason why I do the work that I do. I got asked for years after Empowerment Plan started, why do you keep doing this? Like, the class project ended a while ago. Like, why do you keep doing this? And for a while, I was like, because it's fun and I like people. And it took a long time to recognize that it's like, this is the opportunity I wish had been there for my own parents. Like, this is the opportunity I wish that could have been there when I was growing up, that if somebody could have hired my parents or helped them get through this, what would have been different for my siblings and I? And that speaks really to the first couple of people I hired. Like I said, Annis. When I hired her, she was 58. She had spent most of her life, last 10 years in prison. She was at retirement age. And when she got out of prison, she was told, hey, you can start your life over again. It's going to be great. She got out, she had money saved up, and she was sleeping on cardboard on the streets because no one would take her, especially because of her felony record. And it's like someone's grandmother having to sleep on cardboard in an abandoned house. And then so she got into a shelter. I hired her. She was like one of the toughest in the beginning, and then quickly became like the den mother to everybody on the team, including me. And she had this famous line is, if you ever want me to leave, you're going to have to roll me to the curb in my sewing chair. And I was like, I'm going to get that crocheted on something, like embroidered on something. But so she was this person that helped mentor every single other person that came through the program. And fast forward a couple years in, she has her house, she has a car, she has her adult son and her granddaughter living with her now because they were in the exact same situation. And I remember sitting down with her, and she's like, the biggest thing now is I got to quit smoking and got to find new friends. I was like, okay, this is awesome. We got you to this point. And a week later, she's going home. She's getting out of her car and walking to her house, and she collapses and dies of a heart attack. This was 2 years ago. And that obviously crushed us in so many different ways. Personally, because this is somebody that was like a parent to me. It was a person that I could always rely on to help with whatever we were working on. But also, she was this den mother. She was this part of the culture of the company that was now gone. And what do you do when the thing that you've built the whole culture around, it wasn't me, it was her. What do you do when that person's gone? And we're all there at the funeral. And we're sitting there, and her son gets up and talks. And everyone is talking about this before and after Annis. And they talk about it, and I thought it was about before and after prison. And so her son gets up and starts talking. He's like, look, I don't think you know how much you meant to my mom. He's like, I've gotten to know my mother more in the last 3 years than I have my entire life. And he's like, Veronika, and then he says, Veronika, I hope you understand that, my daughter has her grandmother back because of you. And I don't think you know how much she loves you because she had my Facebook photo printed and framed in their house. It is not a good Facebook photo. does not deserve framing. But he's like, I don't think you know how much that meant. And for me, that was the first time that I recognized the business was actually a business. I know a lot of people tell stories about these touching moments of when they had this, they looked into somebody's eyes and just knew. It took me losing one of the most important parts of what we do to recognize that if we hadn't hired her, she was sleeping alone on the streets on cardboard, and because we did, she was able to buy a house, buy a car. She had set up a college fund for her granddaughter, and she was able to pass away, instead of alone on the streets, she was able to pass away leaving a whole legacy behind. And if it wasn't for this like silly class project, that wouldn't have happened. And that's what we do thinking about the future. You know, we're known as the coat people. I'm known as the coat lady. But our goal is to hire 600 people in the next 3 to 5 years. Thank you. Because there are many other people like Annis, like my parents, that are like amazingly driven, talented people that are out there. And that people are now moving on into other jobs. The woman in the blue sweater that you saw in the video is now in construction work. We have somebody at Quicken Loans. We have somebody at Chrysler. All these people have used us as a stepping stone into something greater. So of those 600, 300 will go on to other jobs. That's over 1,500 kids that we get to pull out of that system as well. And that's what's exciting for me. And we also get to expand into other cities now, not just Detroit, scale the whole model into these other communities, because this is not something that just affects the city of Detroit, it's everywhere. And then the weirdest thing about what we've done is that people have put in orders for our coats over the years that wanted to buy them for themselves. Hunting, camping, fishing, hiking, doomsday prepping, whole weird market, doomsday prepping. Have wanted to buy them for themselves. And we've just been saying no. And there's no faster way to piss somebody off than to tell them no, they can't buy something. And we're now actually, part of what we're doing next is actually launching, and this is top secret. Can't talk about this yet, but I feel good with this group that we can talk about it. We're launching a retail line of what we do because, frankly, the coat is good enough. No one knows how to sew when we hire them, but they're able to make this coat in 1 hour and 6 minutes after 3 months. And I can tell you it's an amazing product that you won't buy out of pity, that you're not going to buy because you feel bad about the people we employ. You're going to buy because it's awesome. And that they spend every day from 9 to 5 working on it, and that it's worth it. And so for us, we're actually naming that in memory of Annis. Her last name is Maxwell. And so that's our constant reminder of why we're doing this and what's coming next. And I have one last story before I show this video and close out and do the Q&A. But I have one email I got that shows why I have the greatest job in the world. I just got this very recently, so I wanted to read it. Is that okay with you guys if I read a very short email? It is from a 10-year-old boy that emailed us through LinkedIn. His mom emailed me saying, hey, there was a $100 donation came in with no information. And then this email followed immediately. And it says, Dear Miss Scott, hello, my name is Lane. I'm going to be 10 in a month, and I would like to know how you volunteered at my age like you. My mom told me about you, and I'd like to be there to help. And these guys are in New Jersey. And I might get some money for my birthday, and I was thinking about sharing my birthday money for the poor, the homeless people, and also making a donation. I got inspired by you, and I would like to say thanks. We became homeless this year when my mom lost her job, and it's just me and her, and my dad isn't around my life. There are some programs in my town that try to help homeless, hungry, or needy people, but no kids are involved, and I want to help. I'm the man in the house because my dad doesn't help us or see me. But I'm lucky and grateful for what I have, and I want to be a doctor when I grow up to help people who are sick and help them healthy. Plus, I love women and babies most, so I can be around them both. I'm like, great OBGYN in the making. When you were my age, how did you start? And where did you start for charity? Because I want some advice from you to help people who need help. And thank you for everything that you've done and do, and you're my hero and my inspiration to make a difference for anyone who needs help. Thank you for everything you do again. A little 10-year-old boy. And I just want to say, like, with this whole group of people that are telling their stories and are at different phases in life, you have no idea the impact that you're having on somebody. That you have no idea that you could be changing someone's life and have no clue. And it's really for him, for his mom, for my parents, for my entire team, that we believe that homelessness should no longer be a life sentence. It is one now. It shouldn't be this legacy that you leave behind. So I thought I would play one quick video and wrap up. I want to show, instead of just hearing it from me, there's one story of one of my current team members, and I thought it would be great to hear it from her.
I never expected to be in the shelter having a baby. Never.
The mission of the Empowerment Plan, it started off by creating coats that turned into sleeping bags that we handed out for those living on the streets, but then quickly became about hiring the people that would need the coats in the first place and creating that job opportunity that helps them get to that stable point in life that they've always wanted.
When I thought of homelessness, I thought of a bum standing at the corner, with a sign. My family became homeless because I had an unexpected pregnancy and I lost my job. We thought we would have no support being with family. So we packed up everything and came to Detroit. But your family can only support you so much. When you go from house to family member, and you end up in your car and the kids are getting tired. So we just put them in the car. We drove around and they just fall asleep. It was kind of okay in a sense that my children didn't really know what was going on because they just had a good time at the park and they don't realize that they're sleeping in the car.
When I met Jessica, she was like so quiet and just kind of sitting there and unassuming and just like what we call survival mode.
I met Veronika Scott. I did an interview with her, and after the interview, they called me an hour later and said, "You're hired. I need you to come in Monday, 9 o'clock sharp." And I got the job.
And then all of a sudden, this like intensely amazing person shows through again, and this person that has amazing traits and you never would have guessed.
It was empowering, very empowering to be around a group of women that knew my struggle and just to connect with people on that type of level.
The ultimate goal for everybody we employ here is to help them get to the point of stability that they want in their lives. This is not about us saying, oh, we know better than you. Oh, we're in a better situation than you, so we know what you need. No, you need to tell us or start figuring out what it is that you want to get to. And with Jessica's drive and enthusiasm and just like straight, I'm going to get stuff done attitude, it's somebody we definitely see even like growing with the company in other ways.
In my future, my goal is to go back to school and possibly do something that can help the empowerment plan grow or branch off into something similar in nature. And I know I want to help people and change the world. For me, being one of those people basically out on the street, it's like I'm giving back to another me.